Hello, everyone. This is Parrish Alford with the Daily Journal. I'm joined by Logan Lowery, our Mississippi State beat writer, and this is Double Coverage, a production of the Daily Journal. We're going to talk all things Mississippi State and Ole Miss for the next half hour or so. We're glad you've chosen to click in with us today. Logan, what's going on, man? How are you?
Doing good. I'm just trying to keep up with everything that's going on. Last night I was kind of headed to the hump, and I knew I was supposed to be at the hump at 7. Why I was going to the hump at 7 o'clock? I knew it was basketball, but I couldn't remember if it was men or women that I was on my way to go see. But I figured it out and covered another women's basketball game last night. Got a men's basketball game tonight at 8 o'clock before 11 o'clock tip or 11 o'clock kickoff tomorrow. So just a busy weekend right now.
Well, we missed you. What was it? Gosh, Thursday. It was yesterday at the Daily Journal Thanksgiving celebration. Now those are quite impressive. Now the Thanksgiving and Christmas get-togethers. It's a potluck thing, so you need to make one of those sometime. Lots of good things there at the Daily Journal at the big feeds. So anyway, this isn't the cooking show. You can check out Jenna Parsons at djournal.com and in the Daily Journal for Cook of the Week and things like that. But Logan, let's talk football of the week. We'll get to basketball a little bit, but let's start. We were talking bowl projections before we got started here, and I know a lot of projections have State going to the Outback Bowl right now. Of course, this isn't a discussion for Ole Miss, but it could be a year from now. We'll see. But I have watched the Outback Bowl with great interest through the years, Logan, and I know there are a lot of different factors that could have State in that game this year, but typically this is not a bowl that embraces Mississippi State or Ole Miss. There have been better teams in terms of ranking and whatnot from Mississippi that the Outback Bowl has just spurned in recent years. So tell us a little bit about why that could change this year.
I don't know why it could change. I just know that, all the you got so many different services that try to make bold projections. And I kind of looked at that earlier in the week, and I think 6 out of the 11 that I looked at had Mississippi State go into the Outback Bowl, which is kind of surprising. I mean, I thought that would probably be the best tiered bowl that State could get to at this point. And, most of them had them in that bowl, which was kind of surprising. And over half of those 6, I think it was 3 of them, had Mississippi State playing Penn State in the Outback Bowl, which I think that would be fantastic to write about. And, all the storylines with Joe Moorhead and his relationship with James Franklin and all that. But, there's some other bowl game possibilities for State, that I don't like as much. I really like that Outback Bowl because it's a January 1st game. It doesn't affect my Christmas at all. I was talking before we went on the air that the last 3 Christmases, I've either missed the Christmas entirely or I've had to leave my family Christmas afternoon to head to the bowl site. So, and you have to do that, looking at like the Texas Bowl, which is another bowl that State's projected to, and probably a little more realistic for State to get to in Houston. But I think that game's on like the 27th or the 29th. I don't have it out right here in front of me, but that's another one of those bowls that I'm going to have to probably leave before Christmas even starts and miss the holiday entirely to go cover that game. So I'm not looking forward to that. The Music City Bowl is a possibility. There's several different ones. The Belk Bowl, which the Belk Bowl is one of those ones I had to leave Christmas afternoon to go to Charlotte to go start covering bowl practices. But the Belk Bowl I actually enjoyed. It was a really fun bowl. It was one of the better bowls that I've been to. So, at least I know if that's where State's chosen, it's a good bowl. I've been to the Music City Bowl before. I haven't covered the week leading up to the Music City Bowl, so I've just been to the bowl itself. So, I enjoy going to the different bowls to see what they all have to offer. Believe it or not, Parrish, the St. Petersburg Bowl, which I think it's like the Gasparilla Bowl or something now, the one that State got to a couple of years ago when they went 5-6 in the regular season, or 5-7 in the regular season. It was actually a really good bowl. I enjoyed it. I mean, they had a lot of fun things to do. Now, the bowl site, in Tropicana Field wasn't that great, But the week leading up to it was fantastic. So I really enjoy. I wish the SEC would kind of adopt that bowl and push out like the Birmingham Bowl or the Liberty Bowl, which those two. I haven't been to the Birmingham Bowl, but I've been to the Liberty Bowl twice, and it's awful.
Well, I'll tell you what, there's not much good about the Liberty Bowl. Those people try hard, but at the end of the day, you can't change the stadium unless you build a new one, and they need a new one, and there's not money for that. Look, they try hard, and there are nice events and all that leading up to the Liberty Bowl, but the stadium is what it is. I'm interested to see, Logan, if the Outback Bowl plays nice in the sandbox and actually does have a lot of interest in Mississippi State. We'll see. No bowl for Ole Miss this year, but the Rebels could be bowl eligible were it not for the ban. They're still needing a win. That could come Saturday in Vanderbilt, or maybe not. I think that game's a toss-up. But we'll talk about that in just a minute. Logan, tell me a little bit. Let's go back to Mississippi State and Alabama. Look, we look at Alabama this year. Anybody that plays them, and I know that we talked about this last week, it's almost like a foregone conclusion that you're just ready to strap up that L, and it's all about how you play in the game. And I saw a couple of highlights from MSU and Alabama. I was in College Station with the Rebels that day, but I know that State had some plays reviewed by the SEC, and I've covered that, written notes about that, both schools through the years, and not much really ever comes from that. But I noticed on one of the replays that a touchdown was called back for a block in the back that looked like excessive breathing or something like that. But what do you think comes from the plays being reviewed?
I don't think anything comes of it. I mean, I think it's the best you could hope for is just an apology from the SEC. Saying, hey, we blew the call. It's not going to change the outcome of the game, obviously. It's not going to put points back up on the board for Mississippi State. So I don't think anything comes of it, And if you expected to go to Tuscaloosa and have calls go your way, I don't know what to tell you. You shouldn't expect that. State, there was a fumble on the third play of the game, Parrish, that State recovered, and could have changed the momentum of the ball game. But Joe Moorhead, it wasn't reviewed by the officials. Joe Moorhead had the option to challenge it. He talked with his coaches up in the booth, and they told him that they didn't think that it would be overturned, so he didn't challenge it. It was clearly a fumble, and down and scores on their opening drive. A few plays later. And then there's Mississippi State. I guess they said the tight end's forward progress was stopped before the ball was stripped out of his hands. If it it doesn't get called, State's got a scoop and score touchdown there. And then the plays that you're talking about, the sequence right before halftime, Mississippi State throws a touchdown, hits Nick Fitzgerald hits Kyle, he runs there down touch, and Dedrick Thomas is behind a defensive back, and the defensive back trips. Dedrick Thomas throws his hands up like, I didn't push him, and here comes the flag, blocking the back. Touchdown gets called back. The next play, Mississippi State throws a touchdown. Nick Fitzgerald to wide open Justin Johnson in the end zone, but the play clock had expired. So they take that one off the board, and then State gets sacked, and they have to settle for a field goal, which they missed. So, that sequence of events took points off the board. In State, that was the missed field goal was the final play of the first half, and State got to start the quarter. So if you take the first touchdown off the board from the opening drive, then it would be a 14-point game. It would be 14-7 going into the third quarter with Mississippi State getting the ball back, but it didn't happen that way. It was 21-0 at that point. State also muffed a punt during that game, which led to an Alabama touchdown. So just not a good game from State, from the official standpoint. Definitely wasn't a good game from Mississippi State from the offensive standpoint. The defense played lights out. They held Tua I still can't say his name. Say it for me, Parrish.
I'm saying Tagovailoa.
All right. Tua had 140 yards in that ball game. So State did a good job on him. They sacked him several times, actually knocked him out of the ball game in the third quarter. I had an interception. Willie Gay had an outstanding game for Mississippi State, filling in for Leo Lewis, who missed the game due to sickness. So Willie Gay gets the start. He has 2 sacks and an interception. So a good game out of State's defense, just couldn't match that offensively, and that's been the case in a lot of games for Mississippi State.
There were a couple of calls that did not go Ole Miss's way against Texas A&M early. One of them, a pass interference that might have resulted in a change of possession and Ole Miss getting off the field. Instead, Texas A&M went down and got an early score. Bottom line is, Ole Miss, Logan, right now is playing hard, and that sounds cliche, but so many people have wanted to say this team is going to mail it in. There's no bowl at the end of the season and all that. I don't think the fact that there's not a bowl game to be had at the end because of the ban, if that was something new that had just come about, breaking news, maybe it would have a different effect right now. But look, these guys have known that since last December. There was the appeal, of course, and the Rebels were trying to get that bowl ban overturned. That didn't happen. They didn't really expect that it would be overturned. The bigger part of the appeal was the fact that the limit for on-campus recruiting, unofficial visits, that was overturned. The NCAA had said last December that Ole Miss could have only one unofficial visit per recruit, per calendar year. And of course, otherwise, if you don't have that restriction, those types of visits are unlimited. And well, now that was overturned. That's much more important than the bowl ban being overturned. When you're talking about building for the future, much more important that you have that restriction on recruiting removed. So the idea that the players are not going to play hard because there's no bowl at the end, I think they're past that. I think they'll play hard against Vanderbilt Saturday, but it's not enough to play hard. They played hard against Texas A&M. You have to play effective. You have to play clean. They got a good defensive effort for, most of 3 quarters against Texas A&M. Ole Miss had the ball in the red zone, Logan, up 14-7. Minutes are clicking off in the second quarter. They've got a chance to go in with a 2-touchdown lead at half, okay? And then they fumble. They've had 2 red zone fumbles, one in each of the last 2 weeks, and they're killers when you're down there and you have a chance to put points on the board. In this particular instance, it's 14-7. Jordan Tiamu fumbles round about the 21 or the 15 or something. I believe it was the 15 where Texas A&M took over. They get the ball. They go down and score then, and it's 14-14 at the half with A&M getting the ball back, where it could have been 21-7 with an Ole Miss lead at halftime. So those types of mistakes, you have to play hard, but you have to play clean also. As you mentioned, State had the muff punt against Alabama. When you're playing against teams of that caliber, you just cannot make mistakes like that. But defensively, I thought Ole Miss got as good a performance as it could from its defense. And you don't see that if you only look at the final score and the box score. You see a defense that gave up 38 points. You see an A&M offense that gained over 500 yards. But what this defense has shown, I think, this season is that it can play well. It can be solid for periods of time, for stretches of time. In the first half against Texas A&M, Ole Miss forced 3 punts. In the third quarter, when they weren't forcing punts, they stopped a couple of drives with turnovers. One of them returned 96 yards, a fumble return by Zedrick Woods, the safety. So they were still getting stops, but you could tell as A&M committed to the run more in the second half, and Ole Miss started getting tired, due in large part to the fact that its offense was not moving the chains. A&M ran 23 plays in the third quarter. Ole Miss ran just 8. That led to fatigue at the end. Offensively, Ole Miss has got to be able to strike during these times when the defense is playing at a higher level. There's a window of time there. There was a window of time against Auburn where the defense was playing well in the first half, and Ole Miss did not take advantage of that by finishing drives in the red zone with touchdowns. There was a period of time also against LSU this team offensively has got to be able to take advantage of that, because this is not a defense that's going to be solid for 4 quarters. It's never going to be dominant this season. It's not going to pitch a shutout. It's not going to do these things, but it will give you, in most games, a window of time, and that's when Ole Miss needs to be ready to strike offensively. And they did that to a degree in the first half. The red zone turnover really hurt them, but in the third quarter, they just weren't able to move the chains, keep drives going. They ended up punting a couple of times there, and the time of possession got away. The defense played more plays, and while the fumble return for a touchdown from Zedrick Woods was really big, it also meant that defense was going right back on the field. So anyway, this team is playing hard. I think Matt Luke and his staff deserve credit for that. I think it shows a connection that the players have for Matt Luke. Logan, we've talked about him as a player's coach, and sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's not. Sometimes coaches are too chummy with their players. I don't sense that right now, but I just watch Luke at practice, and I just see a deep connection there. And you go back to this time last year when Ole Miss was looking for its next head coach, and you remember in the Egg Bowl, an upset win there in Starkville, and players chanting, "We want Luke, we want Luke." Look, Logan, players, like most of us, are comfortable with what they know. Most of the time, they're going to rally around the interim coach. Most of the time, they're going to, call for the assistant coach to be promoted. So I don't know that in and of itself is a description of the connection between Luke and his players. I think it's really deeper than just those moments in time. I think he really has a good connection here, and that's why I think at this stage of the season, they're still playing hard. Yes, they could mail it in, but I don't expect it, because I think they would have done that by now. If they were going to do that, Texas A&M would have been a great place for that to show up, because they were coming off a frustrating loss against South Carolina, very winnable game at home in which they had a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter and let that game slip away. That was also an example of playing hard and continuing to fight, because they were at a time trailing 17-3 in that game. Okay, but they came back, they took the lead and lost it again. But this team is playing hard, and we'll see what that translates to against Vanderbilt in a 6:30 kick in Nashville. It's a toss-up, Logan. Vanderbilt, they're not mailing it in either. Now, they've lost some close games themselves to some highly rated teams. So we'll see. But State's got Arkansas at home. What do you see against the Hogs?
Well, kind of a little bit of what you just said. They're playing hard. They don't have a conference win. They've only won 2 games all year, but a lot of those losses that Arkansas have accumulated this year have been by 7 points or less. They've played a lot of teams right down to the wire, including LSU last weekend. Ended up being I think it was 31-24. It was a 7-point game in there, but they've played hard. They're not going to give up down the stretch. They're still hungry for that first conference win. And if you're Mississippi State, you can't allow that to happen. It's kind of the same scenario that you had for the Egg Bowl last year. Senior day, a lot of emotions that go into that. It's an early morning kick. That Mississippi State's going to be wearing special uniforms on Saturday against Arkansas. So a lot of different things going on for that ball game. But Mississippi State needs to focus in right now. They've got to win these last two ball games to give themselves a position to give the Outback Bowl folks a decision to make. They need to try to get to the best bowl game possible right now. And if they can win the last 2 ball games and win that bowl game, they match last year's win total. Now, granted, there were a lot of high expectations from Mississippi State going into this season. A lot of folks thought they could win 9-10 games this year. Me included. I thought they would win 9 or 10 games this year, but so far that just hasn't happened. They lost some of those early games that they shouldn't have to Kentucky and Florida. LSU was a close ball game. So, they've underachieved so far under Joe Moorhead. He's sitting at 6-4 right now, heading into the final 2 weeks of the regular season. Got winnable ball games still left on the schedule, but you still have to go out there and execute and win those games. The defense is going to give Mississippi State a chance. They have all year, but the offense has got to kick it up a notch. And 3 of State's 4 losses, Parrish, they've not gotten in the end zone in any of those 3 ball games. So the offense has got to produce at the level, at least at half the level that the defense is, because the defense has been elite. The offense has been on the opposite end of that spectrum a lot of the time. So I saw somebody post on social media this week that Mississippi State's offense was bipolar, and it's kind of seemed that way. They've been really, really good in some ball games, and they've been really, really bad in some others. So, it's I guess it's a scenario of which offense shows up from week to week, and it was a close ball game at Arkansas last year. Mississippi State got behind 14-0 right off the bat, turned the football over, and ended up having to come from behind in that fourth quarter and scored the game-winning touchdown with just a few seconds left to go in Fayetteville last year. So if they let Arkansas hang around, it could be an interesting ball game, especially they're used to playing in those close ball games. So it's actually Arkansas's first true road game since September the 22nd. Now, how they go that stretch without having a road game, I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see how Arkansas handles a road environment since they haven't played in one in quite a long time.
Well, I'll tell you what, some of those Arkansas home games right now are seeming like a road environment. I've seen some pictures circulated on Twitter. It's about touchdowns, man, at both of these schools we cover. You got to get down in the red zone, score touchdowns, not kick field goals. So we'll see if that works out for Ole Miss at Vanderbilt. Likely the Rebels will be without Scotty Phillips, who is still in search of 1,000 yards. Been a huge bright spot for Ole Miss as the starting running back this season, his first after transferring from Jones Junior College. In all likelihood, the starter will be Isaiah Woolard, who ran well against Texas A&M's number 2 ranked rushing defense last week. He finished with 64 yards on 16 carries, averaged 4 yards a carry, broke some tackles, had some nice gains. And at the end of the day, Woolard finished with the most rushing yards that Texas A&M has allowed to a running back. There's an asterisk there because Nick Fitzgerald finished, I don't remember how many he finished with, Logan, but I think he had 40 yards until that last quarterback run where he had went like 70 for a touchdown. So even against Fitzgerald, the Aggies' run defense had a lot of success over the course of the game. We'll see what Woolard can do against a Vanderbilt defense whose run defense is almost as bad as Ole Miss's. Just 13 yards separating those two teams. Ole Miss giving up 210 yards a game on the ground. Vanderbilt right around 197. So it looks like an area that Ole Miss might be able to exploit. Offensively, Ole Miss is able to exploit a lot of things because they have a talented quarterback and receivers. But it helps when you can be balanced. And they probably will not have Scotty Phillips to fully take advantage of that situation. But I think there's a lot of potential here for Isaiah Woolard to have a breakout game. We'll see. Scotty Phillips will be a game time decision. Something else that I think could help Ole Miss against Vanderbilt is Jordan Tiamu is healthier. And with that ankle bothering him a little bit less than it did against Texas A&M, I think you'll see his number get called in the run game a little more than it did in College Station. A matchup that does not favor Ole Miss will be Vanderbilt running back Keyshawn Vaughn, a transfer from Illinois who sat out last year. It's probably more likely that he gets 1,000 yards in this game. He's 151 yards away, and Vanderbilt will do a lot of motion, a lot of pre-snap movement to try and get the Rebels out of run lanes. And we'll see. Ole Miss is going to have to be disciplined defensively and see if they can slow down Vaughn. They did a good job with Travion Williams for much of the first half, limited him to 56 yards. Doesn't sound like much of a limit in a half, but Williams was the number 3 rusher in the SEC at the time. He finished with 228 because as that defense got tired in the second half, as we mentioned, then we saw them turn loose of Williams, and he turned in some explosive runs. Had like 8 runs of 10 yards or more, 7 of them in the second half. So we'll see if Ole Miss can contain Vaughn a little bit, if they can cover the tight end and put some pressure on Kyle Shermer. 17 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions for the Vanderbilt quarterback. Ole Miss, if they could get to him, would really help out the secondary. Logan, real quick, we got a couple of minutes left. Let's talk basketball. Ole Miss in action tonight at 7 at historic Hinkle Field House in Indianapolis against Butler. That's where Hoosiers was filmed. And I'm interested to see if Kermit Davis tells his players they have to pass at least 4 times before taking a shot in honor of Norman Dale. We'll see. But that's tonight at 7. The Rebels a 90-64 win in the first game of the Kermit Davis era, that last Saturday against Western Michigan. 4 guards scored in double figures, including D.C. Davis, a walk-on who's kind of worked his way into the rotation. He had 12 points on 4 for 4 shooting in 14 minutes of play. So solid effort from the backcourt. Kermit Davis says he would like to see better rebounding. The Rebels were +3 in the game, but didn't hit the offensive glass the way Davis wants this team to. Center Bruce Stevens had 5 rebounds. That was the most. So that's not a big number in and of itself, but Stevens had no rebounds on the offensive end. So take us home, Logan, with basketball and where the Bulldogs are.
Well, Mississippi State, both teams are undefeated right now. The women are ranked 6th. The men are moved up 1 spot, ranked 17th in the country. They're still undefeated. Men are playing really well. You get to see some of those freshmen that don't look like freshmen. Reggie Perry and Robert Woodard are absolute beasts. They look like seniors coming into the program. I guess Ben Howland described it best. He said they were blessed with Bulldog genetics. Both their fathers played basketball at Mississippi State, and they're both big guys, and they fit right in to college basketball. They're making their way off the bench, but Mississippi State's returning those 5 starters, and you see that continuity on the court. They've played well. Quindary Weatherspoon has been lights out for Mississippi State, scored over 20 points in both of the ball games so far this year. They play Long Beach State tonight at 8 p.m., as I mentioned earlier, and then the women played Lamar last night and didn't play well against Lamar starting off. They had 12 turnovers in the first half, only led by 7 points. And it was a close ball game. And then all of a sudden, Mississippi State in the third quarter outscored Lamar 42-15. Ended up scoring 69 points in the second half, won that game 104-53. So once close game at halftime, State just turned on the Jets in the second half and just wore them out, and did a lot of that with Tierra McCowan on the bench. She only played 5 minutes of the second half. Andriel Howard had a huge game for Mississippi State. So, and it was a big boost to get Andrea Espinoza-Hunter, the UConn transfer, eligible to play late last week. She's played in 2 straight games now that she played at Virginia and then at home last night. She's going to be a big boost for Mississippi State to make it back to the NCAA tournament, to give them a 3-point shooter, a tall guard, plays on the wing. She gives Mississippi State a lot of options with her position and her eligibility.
All right, folks, that'll finish us up today. Ole Miss women did have a nice win earlier this week, 62-55 against Temple. The Ole Miss ladies are 2-1 under new coach Yolette McEwen. We thank you for clicking in with us today. Be sure and come back and join us next week. I don't know what the schedule will be like around Thanksgiving, but hey, we'll have a production sometime before the Egg Bowl. Be sure to look for us at that time.